in terms of, improving your performance, developing on your strengths, career objectives, but also based on the objectives we set, what support do you need in order to kind of meet those over the next, I guess, 6 months. So that's kind of how this looks. And I don't know if anybody has questions on that, or Skylar, this is probably going to be a work in progress. And I think we should kind of just put together a draft tonight, and then also something that I think you should go away and really think about as well. And, probably add comments to, or, we'll probably need another workshop is what I'm saying. But is there any questions from the board?
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious about, I appreciate all this work, but I don't understand what the 9th is then, if it isn't this.
So this is Skylar. This is not the strategic plan. What we're setting forth. So for example, Sue, one of the objectives that we could put here for Skylar would be leading and developing the strategic plan for BMS. And then, some of those activities and deliverables, may still need to be hashed out, but we may have an idea of some of that, and we can also kind of set the time frame. So they're high level objectives that, as the kind of supervisor for Skylar, we need to set for him so that we have something to review at the end of his performance period.
So if I could back us up a little bit, Erica, I think maybe that context setting would be helpful to people. One of our primary jobs as a board body is to evaluate Skylar, to provide him a performance review. That's one of our main jobs. The problem we have is it sounds like historically what they've done is just sort of pulled out a form at the end of the year and gone through and given some grades or rankings, right? That we've never set out specific objectives for Skylar to do during the year. And therefore the performance measurement has been lackluster at best, right? The performance review process has been lackluster. And Skylar, I don't know if this is accurate in how you feel about it, but I think a lot of times you have really specific performance review objectives, and so let's take BMS off the table, Erica, if we could. Do you have another example of a performance review item that, just as an example for us to consider, that you might?
Well, it might be something to ask Skylar, but as an example, it could be, leading and developing a salary scale for, for Sunset Parks and Rec.
Right. Or integrating a diversity and equity plan for the organization.
Right. Or maybe there's more technical, mechanical aspects that, need improvement in the building that we'd like to see happen. And Skylar needs to lead those initiatives.
And then at the end of the year, if we have those down, then Skylar's on the same page, we're on the same page about what we're going to measure at the end of the year. And that way, when we get to the end of the year, we'll say, yep, we did this, or no, we didn't do this, and there's a good reason, or no, we didn't do this, and this needs some improvement, right? Then we would go into an improvement kind of discussion.
Yeah. Right. Does that help clarify, Sue?
I sort of, part of, I'm just trying to figure out why, and I appreciate we're meeting today because the 9th, we're running out of Tuesdays. Because I've just started in the evaluation process this last year. And it was that form letter, but that's what's been done before, right, Skylar? That's what Justin had and Mary Blake had and all that, right?
Yeah, and we're not trying to replace that, but we're trying to set some sort of objective or work plan that he can actually be reviewed upon when we do that performance review. Otherwise, we're making subjective. I mean, we really have no foundation to review Skylar on when we don't have any objectives in place. So we're not replacing that, Sue. We're just trying to use a work plan so that Skylar has a roadmap for the next 6 months. And he has kind of clarity on what some of those objectives look like for him.
See, and I'm confused because I thought we had that with, except for what, Sunset Recreation Center. Don't we have that, Skylar? I don't have a copy of it in front of me to say, this is what we did. And certainly everything can be improved upon. So I'm wondering, you know, if with the number of people that are approaching Skylar about, let's do this with this building and let's do that with this building, I think we need to offer some direction in addition to what ideas he has so that we're functioning as an effective team. But I don't know if that is objective.
That'll be for Tuesday though. That's the strategic plan for Broadway. This is much bigger than that. This is Skylar's work plan.
I think it has this path that we're taking right now with work that Erica is presenting. We didn't really plan it as an agenda item today, although it's very viable for an agenda item. And I think a lot of this and what
This
our
was the
what
agenda item, you guys. This was the agenda item, was to do this.
Right, and that's what
Yeah,
I called
I like
Skylar yesterday and clarified. Yes,
Can
I
finish,
agree.
please? I was going to
Yes.
finish. I think a lot of these expectations and goals, yes, can be set by the board and monitored by the board, but we have to remember that we have to budget for these things and what are the material things we want to accomplish and what are the strategic things we want done, otherwise. So, but 6 months, yeah, we've got a few months till the end of the fiscal year. We are probably anxious to set a path and set the goals for the Broadway Middle School or the Sunset Recreation Center. And we have a meeting next week with regard to this too. I have not looked over what Erica apparently has emailed. I have not received it. It's probably on the district server, which I haven't seen for a couple of days. But I think it's a viable thing to have on the agenda, but I wasn't prepared to discuss it. I think there are things that we, pursuant to a strategic plan for the recreation center, need to, ask questions and get information about Skylar. We've had an update recently about using the center, parts of the center for a warming center for the homeless. And I'd like to hear something about that too, and to see how that's going to work. I know they've been working over there cleaning up and making preparation on a couple of rooms, but that's something there too that, you have to kind of think on your feet when those things come along. And, to be approached by a class of community action like that is really great. And it's something we can do to contribute to the welfare amongst the community members.
Yeah, but I think what we're missing here is that is slated to be discussed on Tuesday. What this workshop was meant to do was to set objectives for Skylar. So any strong performance review process, you cannot have a review of a person without having objectives for them. I mean, and what I'm hoping we can do is actually put something together in writing as a group. And if it's not something that you're interested in, then, maybe a few of us can stay on and do that.
I'm not saying I'm not interested. It's just, I would like to figure out where we stand and what we need to do to make sure, that we are able to possibly acquire investment or partnerships. I would like some more legal feedback about what we can and can't do as a public entity with the property.
So,
And I would, go ahead.
sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were done.
It's okay,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I just want to differentiate. I think we're talking about two different things. This session, so Tuesday's session is to talk about all those things that you're talking about, Mike, the planning for Broadway Middle School. This session actually had nothing to do with Broadway Middle School. And I think the confusion is it says that on the agenda.
Right.
But this session tonight was really about how are we, as Skylar's supervisors, going to judge whether or not he did a good job at the end of the year.
Well, that's fine. And I see Catherine is here. I'd be happy for her to take the chair. I'm willing to discuss, anything that's appropriate. I'm a little anxious about, where we stand on planning and moving ahead. So, but the strategic plan is a very important thing for managing the performance of the executive director.
And Catherine, it would be good for you to, Mike, me, I'm not saying that right. Catherine, Mike, and I were the three that were involved with the process before. And, not to try to relive all that unfortunate business, and that's a nice word for it. Skylar's previous, the time before this time, evaluation was not done properly. So we fixed it, but there's documentation that we followed. So I feel like.
Yeah, but you're missing, I think we're fully.
I don't understand why we're reinventing a wheel.
We're not reinventing a wheel. If you remember, there was no objectives attached to that performance review.
So can we pull up that might be helpful actually, Erica. I don't know if we have that performance review. And
yeah, I just also don't want to go in circles. I have to admit, like I'm pretty stressed work-wise. So if this isn't like a topic we want to get into, we can move on. Just to be honest.
I personally feel like this is really important. So like for me, for example, I would offer up as a director, like if I were going to think about so this is how I do it for my work. So I think about in 6 months, when we come to the time when it's time to do Skylar's review, what would we be really excited about that Skylar accomplished? So one thing I'd be really excited about is that Skylar developed Skylar-led staff, community partners, and other stakeholders in a strategic planning and contractors in a strategic planning process. That's it. I want to make sure that gets done. At the end of 6 months, we can look back and say, how well did Skylar lead that work? That would be an example. Right now, what I don't want to do is get to 6 months from now and have no way to judge whether or not we think Skylar, Skylar, I think one of the things on the overview that we did before is that Skylar treats the staff well. Well, we don't really
Yeah, what's measuring that?
How would we know that? We don't know so we have to come up with metrics that we can actually measure.
Right.
And so to me, that's what I'm looking for in this is maybe 3, maybe 4 big ticket items that we say as a board, as Skylar's collective boss, these are things that are priorities for us to see you do well.
And this is just an attachment to the performance review. So this is not replacing anything. This is just an attachment to the performance review that gives us that roadmap, like Celeste said, of something to review when we come to that point. Some metrics, some deadlines, what does Skylar want to develop? Have we ever had a development plan for Skylar? Have we ever asked him what his career objectives are? Have we asked him what training he'd like to do? Those are the things that, what support can we provide him and the organization to get to the next level?
So Sue, I think what you are referring to is the spreadsheet that we had before that we filled out, and we will continue to use that. But the part of the bottom of the spreadsheet, there were questions that says, what are the targets to be met for next year? And what skill development is expected during the next year? And those are, I believe, the 2 questions that we need to answer today so that Skylar has things to aim for so that we can judge his performance when we get to that time. So some of the targets that we had put on this were strategic planning, facilitate a board review of the strategic plan by May 2021, transparency, enact policies, communication, in partnering with the board to ensure governance policies and processes are documented, codified to ensure consistency in leadership, strong fiscal management, strategic planning again. So those were some of the things that every person on the board submitted to be a target. Some of the skill development, we talked about putting in a system in place where Skylar can address issues that the board may be causing, continue public outreach, seeking training opportunities, consider achieving certified park and rec professional. Yeah, so that's where we had left it at the end of his review.
Actually, Catherine, I thought that was a really good list. I was trying to take notes, but I couldn't write fast enough. I mean, maybe that's a place to start. And I think, I don't know, Erica, if you had a different way to do it, but maybe it's easier for us to edit something that she's already got started, like that list from last year. And part of this process, in my estimation, should be Skylar telling us, like, what do you see as priority on that list? What,
right.
yeah.
We need to have a discussion around that. And so I mean, I don't think we have that anywhere besides like a paper copy. So I don't know if the reason I sent out this Google document is that way Skylar and others can work on it. You know, because like I said, it's not going to be completed right at this second. But if you want me to use something different, whatever is.
I think we could start with that document, but maybe Catherine, if you could read, I don't know what you're reading off, Catherine, for that list.
Give me 2 seconds and I will forward. I mean, you guys got it before,
Great.
but I will send it again.
Is it in an email?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I need some education. How am I supposed to look on the screen and see an email too?
Actually, so for that reason, let me propose a friendly amendment. Catherine, could you read each of those pieces individually that you have, and we just discuss them one at a time? And Skylar, maybe you can give your perspective if you think it's a legitimate objective or not.
Yeah, and I can just start taking notes here while we talk.
So the first one for what are the targets to be met for next year was strategic planning.
Which is pretty broad. So I think, wouldn't we want to make that more BMS related, or is that?
Well, so multiple people had that. We had by May 2021, facilitate a board review of the strategic plan, formalize revisos, refinements.
I mean,
yeah.
So I think a strategic plan. So yes, there's going to be a more detailed Broadway strategic plan, and I think maybe that's 2 items. But I actually, as a director, I have great fears around having only a Broadway strategic plan without an overarching strategic plan for the district. I think that has to be a thing. Like BMS is only one part of the district. Sorry, the Sunset Recreation Center, is that what it is? Sunset Recreation Center is only a facility that's one part of the district. And so I think there should be an overarching strategic plan. Maybe it doesn't need to be as deep a process, but I think I would like to see as a director, an overarching strategic plan.
I agree. We've talked about that for some time, developing a strategic plan, you know, with maybe 5 priorities that we could rank. And these priorities could easily become a focus of part of a performance evaluation.
So if we can kind of list out what those deliverables would look like. So we have BMS. Skylar, I'd like to hear from you in terms of like what you think some of the deliverables or activities within the strategic plan would look like.
COVID recovery would be on that list. Excuse me.
So I guess I want to make sure, are we talking about the overall district strategic plan?
Yeah.
Or BMS?
Yeah. No, so we put overarching strategic plan. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So
you're in
it's
the-
overarching strategic plan. BMS is one of those deliverables. So it would be just others on top of that.
Okay, so I guess included, some components of that strategic plan would be, this cost recovery discussion. I think it's going to be, I'm just reading the tea leaves a little bit. I feel like it's going to be really challenging for me or for district staff or for us as an organization to have this a strategic plan started and completed by the end of the fiscal year, especially with the BMS strategic plan kind of running maybe a parallel track, if I'm reading it right. Is that what you all are saying?
Well, I'm wondering if, I think maybe it's a good point. For example, when we meet, on Tuesday, is our goal to only develop a strategic plan for Broadway, or is our goal to more look at an overarching plan for the district? I mean, I think that's a good question.
I
Yeah.
feel like the strategic plan should be a district plan with bullet points underneath for, here's the Broadway Middle School part, here's the
Yeah.
Sunset Pool part, here's the youth center part, here's the Bob Chisholm part.
But
Okay.
the Broadway plan is such a big
Yeah.
piece.
It
is.
It'll
And
be
maybe-
like 3/4 of the plan, so.
I guess I kind of feel like it might be more beneficial to have the Broadway plan,
A separate objective.
the Broadway plan be completed or at least started, with our meeting next week, and work on that in earnest for the next couple of months. And then as that's getting closer to being wrapped up, maybe towards the end of the fiscal year, then we really dive into just an overall district strategic plan, or at least a visioning experience for us to kind of work out some of the bigger picture details. And I do agree with Celeste's point in that I think there needs to be two separate things. I'm just,
So
Sorry.
should we make that actually more of an overarching objective? I mean, I kind of agree that it might be large enough to be its own objective.
Oh, Can I ask just a question about this? When I'm talking, like, strategic plans can be either small in scope or big in, I mean, there's so much variation. So Skylar, I would just ask you, like, off the top of your head, what is your goal for the pool by the end of this fiscal year?
for the pool,
Mhm.
I would say the goal would be that we have resumed normal programs and operations as much as possible, and that we're generating revenue at the level that we were generating revenue before. We're not gonna,
Okay,
cost-
so I would just say, you just came up with strategic plan item number 1. That
Exactly.
is all that's on the overarching strategic plan for this year. I would propose it be very simple. That
Yeah.
is it.
Yeah.
Resume operations and get back to a place where, and of course, during the year that could change because of COVID, right? We don't know. But putting that as a goal it now becomes a thing that we know that we're aiming for by the end of the year for Sunset Empire Park and Rec. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Now, Broadway's plan is going to be much more complicated than that, because it's going to be, how do we evaluate proposals? What kind of work needs to be done on the property for now? What eventually do we want to do? Broadway is going to be a whole different animal. That's a whole different thing.
I
That's
need,
plan.
I need clarification. Are we talking about fiscal year or end of year?
Well,
Fiscal.
because his review period is in July, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so, because I don't know that it's realistic to expect to be back by June with COVID, especially with the heavier duty strains
That was
that
just-
are,
That was just an example, Sue, of something. I mean, the whole point of that was to sort of show
okay.
what an example of something on this overarching Sunset Empire strategic plan could be. I mean, I almost think we're talking about two different products. Like, I think we need an SEPRD strategic plan, and then Broadway Middle School is more like a master plan for the property. It's like a completely different.
Yeah, I think it needs its own objective personally.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so too.
Skylar, don't you have objectives for yourself by June?
Well, I have what's in my review, and I have the guidance that the board has either provided me or that's just permanently, a category in the review. And I try to, I guess, meet those standards, but I think this is more specific. And if nothing else, it's a refresher for me and maybe for the board too, to say, these are things that Skylar is actually working on and will be held, I don't want to say like held accountable for at his review. I mean, there'll be subjects at his or topics at his review.
And I not to be a dead horse or whatever, Providence went to a program where I personally developed my goals for the year. And then that was part of the evaluation at the end of the year, was what I thought of my goals. Do
Yeah.
you not have anything like that?
That's what we're doing, Sue.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, but don't.
We're
You
the
don't-
boss. We're the
Okay.
boss. He doesn't, because we haven't done that with Skylar yet. When you did that at Providence, you gave your goals to somebody, didn't you? Didn't you have a boss?
Yeah.
That's, so here,
What we're doing.
that's what we're doing. We're the boss. Skylar needs to do that with us. There is no list of, I mean, Skylar might know in his head what there's doing, but there's no explicit do you know what Skylar's goals are for the year?
I don't remember.
Exactly. That's why we're
You
trying to
don't
do
know,
this.
right? So we need to write a document. That is the strategic plan.
Okay, so strategic plan for the district, which is very simple goals by the end of the fiscal year. Strategic master plan for the Sunset Recreation Center, at least kind of outlined by the end of the fiscal year. COVID recovery.
Hey,
any-
Catherine, sorry, I maybe it's just kind of fast, but I think you're basically listing out smaller strategic plans within the overarching plan, the way I'm
Yep.
hearing it. Yeah, okay.
So COVID would be addressed.
Um,
Skylar, like I would just ask Skylar, like around COVID, and I know we're halfway through the year, so you've already done a lot. Skylar, what is your plan to address COVID?
I mean, is this one of those example goals that I should just say anything and we're just learning from each other, or is this
Exactly.
like actual?
But it might inform eventually where we get, but this would be an example of something. I mean, I already know of some stuff that you've been doing, so it is not, you guys have done a lot to address COVID.
Yeah, I guess I want to ensure that the district is adhering to the guidance that we've been given, protecting our employees and our community, and do everything we can to open programs and facilities as soon as we can in the safest way possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would be, that's a good example. That is a good example of something you'd put down as a priority on a strategic plan.
And then I guess the other piece that I think is important is, say, position the district so that we're eligible to receive, support or government aid when those programs have become available to us. And we've done that, but I think continuing to make sure that that's a possibility.
That's a great one.
I actually think just even further than just the federal kind of government grants, that you could have an activity under, for the overarching strategic plan, I mean, we may even want to set a number, based on that budget that Celeste had put together of kind of for the first year kind of grants that we'd like to go for, or, a certain number there. And I'll just put like, Skylar, you could think about that and we can fill in.
So is the goal here though, what I'm wondering is, so we think about projects or objectives. So we're not actually talking about completing a strategic plan this year. What we're talking about is at the end of 6 months, Skylar, is it realistic to have a list of those 10 goals or whatever that would lead us into 2022?
Sorry, Celeste, you confused me. You said that we wouldn't have a strategic plan in place, but we would have.
So
goals.
in other words, so when we write down here that the objective, the project or objective is to put together, that's basically item 1, is to put
Yeah.
together a strategic plan for Sunset Empire. Could be literally 1 page of priorities. Do you think at the end of the year, so at the end of whatever it is, June 2021, will you be in a position to be able to work with the board to have a list of 10 priorities for 2022? Like the examples that you just gave us.
I think I will be. I guess the cloud hanging over this potentially is the election, and not knowing exactly, if the board will remain intact. And I mean, I just got some notice from the county today about the timing for that, but we won't really know, I guess, if the board is going to remain, assuming that you're not all going to be able to run unopposed until about early to middle of June. And so I think that's the only question, Celeste. I mean, I'd like to propose that, but sometimes there's that that concern with people who are in an incumbent position, but their position isn't turning over. And if there's significant turnover, which is possible just because we have all 5 of the seats up for election, that would be the only thing I think that would stop us. But I like the idea a lot.
I mean, for me, and I will tell you, so a strategic plan survives board rotation. To me, this would be the reason to get it into place. So this is one of the things that I actually asked when I initially came on the budget committee, is I wanted to know if there was a strategic plan in place. Because that way I'm not starting from scratch with my own Celeste ideas about what should be happening. I am seeing what the previous board's priorities were, and I can ensure that way that there's some continuity, that now my job is to carry forward the priorities that were already established by my predecessors. And so this is the reason you have a strategic plan. So it isn't willy-nilly and doesn't change with every board member.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just speed that or move that process up to May, or even,
Yeah.
before then, just because I think the timing is auspicious.
So both,
Yeah.
so for both of these, okay.
So Skylar, you just said something that confuses me. Are they changing the election times? I mean, all of
No.
us have to run or not run or whatever. So I thought we were doing something by March.
So you have to file by March 18th, and then ballots are mailed out in April, the end of April. And then I think there's usually a month span for people to turn in ballots. And usually we don't have elections finalized, the results finalized and ratified and all that until about the time of our board meeting in June. So that's all.
Okay.
I do think, if I just might mention, I see grant writing on there. I think grant writing is going to be important. One of the things that will facilitate grant writing, which needs to be started to fit the schedules of certain grants, depending on their due date and the review dates and so on. But we will need to be able to define through our strategic planning and through Skylar's guidance, we will need to be able to identify the projects that are technically, I quote, shovel ready, unquote, that, are eligible for grants. And we need to kind of, the strategic plan from BMS, for BMS will certainly be a big driver for targeting those grants and sources of grants that would benefit our needed projects. So
Definitely.
anyway, I just wanted to mention that the things kind of weave together, and the overarching is good. I'm kind of anxious to see where we can find some matching funds, and it'll be put up or shut up, but we need to identify the projects, the capital projects that we can seek grant funding for.
Well, and I also think this is where having a strategic plan in place is helpful. Funders want to see that they're not just funding some random idea that somebody had on a project for the district. They want to see that it's part of a bigger overarching plan.
I agree. I agree with that too.
And I'm actually wondering if a grant strategy, if this is such a big part and important, that's what I'm hearing from the board, that maybe this is a third objective, is to develop a grant strategy. Maybe it isn't actually embedded in those ones, and it deserves a little more space.
It's true, because it does go across all.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would say, you know, is I don't want to overwhelm, you know, usually we got to try to stay pretty small with the objectives and probably maybe 5 at the most. But Skylar, I think that there's also probably other pieces, maybe like operational finance, HR, or other things that, you know, you're thinking about that I don't want to lose as well, you know, for the coming months. So I'll put a 5 for, and I think we should set that number as we're going along with the strategic planning. But I think we should have a goal in mind when it comes to the grants.
So, Erica, just as a suggestion, on his evaluation, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate categories with, you know, things underneath them. But one is board relationship, one is vision goals, one is financial stewardship, one is organizational leadership, and one is community relationships and partnerships. I feel like we should pick a goal for each of those sections that we can evaluate.
That's interesting. I mean, I think the first 2 fall under both community partnerships and organizational, what was the other one? What was that?
Development.
Yeah.
Yes, and financial stewardship, I would say, would be grants.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should pick something, a goal for sure, but I think we just definitely want to make the objective a little more specific than just organizational development or.
No, I know, but I mean,
yeah.
like, there's topics underneath those, but I
Right.
feel like we
Right.
should have something for each of those sections. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for board relationship, one of the things that somebody had suggested as a target was that by May of 2021, meet with each board member at least twice outside of board meetings to solicit feedback, address concerns, and build relationships.
Does that seem reasonable? I mean, that's really I mean, that seems like seems like you've already done a lot of that. Because again, we'll be reflecting on this whole year, right?
I mean, it's an activity though. So do we want to make the objective board relationships or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Strengthen board relationships, right? That's
right. That's the objective.
So Skylar, would you say it's realistic that by the end of the year, again, reflecting on the full past 12 months, that you will be able to meet with each board member individually twice?
And I think the caveat to that should be assuming that the board members are agreeable to meeting.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is just starting from henceforward, right? We're not talking about meetings that have already occurred.
I think it would include meetings. So you already have
Yeah.
checked most of that off the list.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's pretty.
Okay.
Catherine, what was it? Meet with?
Each board member at least twice outside of board meetings to solicit feedback, address concerns, and build relationships.
Okay.
Those are good.
So maybe let's keep going with the objectives. What was another kind of overarching?
Vision goals. I think that could be
strategic planning. Yeah.
But I also think that could be something that he sees for himself.
Well, that we have the development plan. So there's also objectives that would fall under here. So they may fall down here.
Okay.
Catherine. So an objective on the development plan could be, well, for me as an HR person, it could be, you know, I want to receive my accreditation in HR this year, you know, so that would be like a development goal. So something along those lines for Skylar. So what was the others, Catherine?
So we kind of hit on financial stewardship already, I think, with the grants.
Do we want to make
Organizational-
that more though, Skylar? Is there more? I mean, I know we've like implemented a new financial system. Are there things within that that you see as a gap that maybe needs improvement this year?
Well, I guess, I mean, I think the board is made some, I guess, given us some direction, given staff some direction about, you know, the supplemental budget and some other things that kind of developed after I think we set that priority. So I would say that that's sort of in the same area of this. And it's not just the supplemental. I think it's trying to put together a budget for next fiscal year that has all these new dynamics and takes into account the position of the district, given this entire, what looks like it's going to be an entire year of
Oh, yeah.
you know, COVID
Yeah.
program.
So
So
one of the things that's under the financial stewardship that we don't really have a definable way necessarily to rate that is avoids redundancy and waste within the organization. Is there something that we could?
I mean, yeah, I would say, Catherine, normally, I mean, I think that is a pretty regular thing to rate for, but to tell you the truth, I'm much more concerned with staff's attention being on the COVID ball, like making sure that we're minimizing risk because of the COVID situation. I mean, in other words, I think I always look
But
at,
I'm just saying, like, how do we measure? Is there something that we can measure that by?
well, I think to me, that is part of the reason that I was sort of a hound about the supplemental budget. I mean, by demonstrating through budget process and financial reporting that that we are averting risk where possible and maintaining a balanced budget.
Okay.
So should I put financial stewardship here? I mean, I just don't want to overwhelm Skylar. I mean, we don't want to go too overboard. So I just want to make sure we're picking like the top 5, but I can put that here. Or do we want to embed it within 1 and 2 in terms of the strategic planning process? What do you think?
I mean, I would say, to me, the priority, I mean, this is related to financial. So this is, maybe the priority would be to, like, given COVID and the risk of a recession, maintain strong communication with the board regarding financial position. That actually does 2 things, right? It checks the financial stewardship box and it checks the board communication box.
I mean, I kind of almost see that underneath number 1, you know, just while developing that strategic plan is just really solidifying that financial kind of, or, I mean, but.
I see a strategic plan as way looking forward. I want to know today if our finances are in order. Like, I want to know that we aren't somehow going into the red on our budget, like overspending, given that we're not, and I think you're already doing this, Skylar, so I don't think this is much of a lift because you guys are doing this. What I want is for there to be props at the end of the year when we say, because I know it's a lot of work to be going back and figuring out where we stand and to I think your other piece about taking advantage of receiving aid where we can, that is part of this financial stewardship thing. And I want to make sure you get props for doing that because not all executive directors are doing that.
Is there anything else, Skylar, for this section, like activities? Is there anything around like the financial system or anything?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I think it goes along with this. I can't remember, sorry, what the other categories are. So maybe it has more appropriate spot in a different category, but implementing the, you know, our new financial software and
Mhm.
having that up and running by the end of
Yep.
the fiscal year.
Great one.
like I said, I want to say is there like Catherine, is there like an operations category? But
Not, not really. I think that's actually kind of the best spot for it. We have board relationship, vision goals, financial stewardship, organizational leadership, and community relationships and partnerships.
So I would add, beyond this financial one, that just occurs to me that you're also during this, I mean, it is a priority to me as a board member, is the safety of our staff and the safety of the community. And I think your team has done an extraordinary job at adhering, at paying attention to that. And I think it should be on here.
Well, could we, I kind of feel like there does need to be an operational bucket. Because I think you could lump some of the HR stuff that we've
Yeah.
talked about in here. Okay.
And to me, during this period of time, where we are right now for this year, safety is a big concern. Like as a board member, I would be really uncomfortable if Skylar was not leading the team to be as safe as possible. Just would put us at such great risk. And that has happened for some organizations, right? Like where they're getting sued by their employees for not having a safe work environment. So I think elevating and prioritizing the fact that we're keeping folks safe, our staff and our patrons.
I
is
agree
really
with that. One thing we could follow up and put it on the goals to see where we stand with certification of program leaders, especially in aquatics. There was a mandate for a certification for certain program leaders. Is that correct, Skylar? It'd be fair enough to see where we stood on that and whether we were going to finally accomplish that goal. Yet I know that with the flux in the use of the pool facilities, just having the staffing there and program leaders too, it may be a challenge. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I can say right now that if it was the end of June, then we would fall woefully short in that area, but it's a result of, we haven't brought a lot of those aquatic fitness classes back. We haven't been able to necessarily pull on the same strings for those employees to complete their aquatic training. And I guess candidly, I'll share, while that was a priority with our previous board, I just didn't know if that was a priority still for this board. If that was something that they were still important or still really focused on.
Well, we haven't revoked it, as far as I know. I think there's some give and take on that. I think we have to have it. I think it's good to know where we stand, at the end of the year on that, regardless.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mitigating factors.
I would agree with Mike. I don't think that this year necessarily, we understand that things happen, COVID happened, pools closed, but it is still something that was passed by the previous board. So I do think we should have an update on that at least.
Sure.
What would be the like language for that, or where does that fall?
And can I
Organizational
interrupt
leadership.
for a second? The weather is not looking good. If I go out, I will get back in.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure, because my computer went down 3 times with a previous meeting today. So
Okay.
I just want to let you know that I would not hang up on you at all, ever.
Okay.
So my apologies for interrupting, but that was a pretty big gust that just went by. Sorry.
Catherine, you were saying organizational development?
Leadership potentially.
Okay. I
don't know.
I feel like we have a lot. Do you think it falls within anything that we have, or?
I keep trying to scroll my screen, but I keep forgetting that you're scrolling.
I know. You want me to? So we have the overarching strategic plan. We have the strategic plan for Broadway, applying for X number of grants, board relationships, financial.
I think some of this could fall in board relationships, because I do think there is this piece, and it sounds like, Skylar, it's been an ongoing piece, like and this will help, this document I think will help, but like having these objectives written down, it's a communication vehicle, right? It's so that you're on the same page and we're on the same page. And so I think in strengthening board relationships, like we could just ensure documentation of and revisiting or because that, so for instance, Mike, I agree. I think the certification thing happened before, it hasn't been revoked, but we should have a better process that we're going back and reviewing. Like, I don't know that your board is actually on the same page about whether that's a good idea to be doing during COVID or not. Like, I would tend to say, no, there are other priorities now, and that we should put that on hold until COVID's
Hey, Eric.
done.
Yeah.
Erica, I think that what Celeste is talking about
Okay.
needs to
It's
go
different.
under strengthening board relationships more, which is more just how do we ensure consistency
Yeah.
and follow through with those kind of edicts or, motions and whatnot from board to board. And then under the operational improvements, I think is where we should have the follow through on the certifications for the lifeguards.
Sorry, so for the, which part does it go under?
Operational improvements, I would put that,
Gotcha.
What it's,
communicate, communication, I don't know, hold on, I'm thinking it through.
Could it be like
communicate
communicate status of lifeguard
Yes.
certification?
There you go, perfect.
Can I, on the strengthen board relationships, can
Yeah.
I ask, is that like the educational thing we're doing tomorrow and Thursday?
yeah, well, we could say provide training opportunities.
Right.
Good one. That's a good one.
Yep.
And what was our cutoff time for tonight?
5:30.
Okay, because I think what I'd like to do is focus on just kind of the deliverable part. Skylar, for the support required, I'd kind of like you to go away and think about that because, I think you should kind of almost dictate and ask us, say, okay, based on this objective, I really feel I need this support from you and from others. So.
Okay.
I wanted to ask something about just the language we're using. When do we move away from Broadway Middle School to Sunset Recreation Center? And my only question in that is, I've recently heard us talking about how we're trying to get people to understand we're more than just the pool. And, so, I was thinking of how my daughter used to talk about, I'm going to work, or she'd say, I'm going to swim practice, but she never said, I'm going to the pool. And the only people I've heard talk about the pool are the classes I'm in. Is the pool open? Is the pool closed? And if we want to change the dialogue of what we call ourselves, it has to begin, so the pool is called Sunset Pool. That's what's on the building. And so when do we move from Broadway Middle School to Sunset Recreation Center? And is there a thing that we want to be promoting that we're not just the pool? Sunset Pool is direct. We want to address. So I'm just
Sue,
asking.
I think that's something, we haven't actually voted on a name for the new facility. It's something that Skylar and his crew kind of coined to identify the building. And I think it's going to be one of those things we need to have a discussion about, which I'm all in favor of it but we need to add that to a board meeting.
Okay.
I agree.
So development plan.
Do we want to head down that way or do we feel good about?
I feel pretty good about the top part. I think we kind of hit on most of the things. The only thing that, community relationships and partnerships was one of the other categories.
But
Which
that's-
I think we can.
implied. Yeah, I think
sorry.
I agree. I think it's implied in, if we're going to
Right.
develop either a Broadway master plan and or, I would be curious to pause for a second and let Skylar
Yeah.
provide us feedback on what does this look like to you? Does this look like a list of objectives that you can live with? And again, keeping in mind that the top 2 items, it doesn't mean that they're carried out by the end of the year. It means that the plan, that we have a plan.
The plan, exactly.
How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm in support and I'm grateful for the time you guys are investing in this process tonight. So I'll do my best to meet your expectations and keep you informed of the progress.
I mean, I think that a lot of times, that's why I was trying to keep us a little bit slim on the objectives because we do need to be realistic. So I think if anything, it's more just, it gives us a roadmap and gives you something to kind of update us on, even if you haven't accomplished all of this, right? So,
Right.
And I do feel like a lot of the things that we did right there down are things that he's already done or is already doing. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
feel like a lot of it's new things per
right.
se.
And I would add to that, Skylar, so kind of accomplishments that you and the staff have already made, let's add those to the deliverables here. So, Skylar, do you have access to Google Docs? Is this something you guys use ever? Not really.
We don't use Google Docs, but I'm comfortable using it. I think the other place that this could potentially live is in our board Microsoft Teams folder. And once you send this to me or it's ready to go, I'm happy to transfer it to there and send out the link. Or I don't know if it necessarily matters where it lives as long as it's in a place where all the board and myself are able to access it and kind of refresh.
Can you, does Teams allow you to work on documents like together? Like, is it similar? Okay. Well, yeah, if you want to add it to that, then we can have a live document there for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea. And Erica, thanks for all the work at putting this template together. I think this is useful. And I think having something like this, I agree that a lot of this stuff is that we know that Skylar's already working on, but I think having it written down ensures that we're all on the same page about being worked on.
Yeah, this is great. This is good, Erica. Thank you for the initiative that you've taken, and I appreciate it. I had assumed then that we have some consensus with this format, and when we could basically approve it at a board meeting with some further review next week, and then our board meeting later in the month. I was concerned about the new recreation center rollout too, and I hope that Skylar can continue to give us some updates and insight into what's cooking over there with Clatsop Community Action.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to, we could just save some time or talk about that now. For example, we could have Skylar go away and actually set the development plan objectives himself, and just we could have a additional shorter workshop to look at those.
Yeah, this is a great draft.
Yeah, and I mean, apologies. I think there is some confusion on what we were working on today. So I just worked on this because I thought we were working on objectives. So thanks. So do we want to pause on the development plan and hear some updates from Skylar?
Let's ask Skylar.
Can we add something on number 6? Because it's not just the lifeguard certifications, right, Skylar?
Yeah, it's actually aquatic fitness instructor certifications.
I'll just put staff certifications.
That's fine.
Yeah. And Skylar, there may be, I know that from kind of a maintenance perspective, there might be some key things that would go under number 6, and I'll let you kind of look at that, but maybe just even upgrades that you guys have already made or that you're planning to make.
Sure.
Okay.
So this is a document. I guess I just want to make sure that I'm able to look at and potentially edit, or what's the
definitely.
Okay.
That's the plan. I'd like for you to actually just dive into this and start editing it or making it more of your own. Okay. For sure. So.
And then just so I know about the timeline, so come I don't know, April, May, June, this is going to be just included as part of my performance review?
Yeah, this would just be an attachment to that. So it's something that when Catherine, sends out the performance review to all of us, we can kind of refer to this and really we have a metric to evaluate you on.
Okay. All right. And what month does the board want to, I guess, kick off that process or have it completed by? I'm just want to make sure.
When is your review due again?
Well, you all did my review in August after
Yeah.
you and Celeste joined the board.
But when
But
is
that
it
was for-
actually due?
My anniversary with the district, or my that date is in July.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's when I'd like to get us back on track with the actual due date.
Okay.
But is it awkward? When would a new board seat?
They would see in
June.
July. Yeah.
Oh, would they?
So I would push back your review into June so that to have like a June 15th due date annually for your review. That
That's-
way, because it really is not fair for a newly seated board. I mean, that was, I think, very, like, we had to take some guesses because we just had not been here, the new people. And so I would aim to establish a date of June 15th.
Okay.
Yeah, and
I think
mean,
that's something that we should add to the agenda and
Discuss,
approve.
yeah. I
But-
agree.
But you guys, we don't have to necessarily change the effective date. We can just do the review in June and we can keep his actual review effective date on his anniversary.
Right.
Which is fine, but I do think that we should put that down in writing.
Okay.
Yeah, I
and-
think that
and
should
make
be
it
part of
official.
the, and I think it makes sense just moving forward, whether it's Skylar, whoever's in that executive director position, you would not want them to have their performance review done by a board that was seated 2 weeks earlier, right? Like just as a
Yeah,
practice.
it's very
it
weird.
takes
Yeah.
place. Yeah,
But I think it just is because of when he was originally hired, it's working out that way. So yeah, for sure.
but a performance review doesn't have to be held on a higher anniversary, on an anniversary date.
No, it doesn't. But that's the way they're doing it. So I think we should stay consistent.
Oh,
with
is
it.
that how you do it across the
Yeah.
organization? Yeah. Okay.
But
So do we want to, Skylar, do you want to discuss objectives for your development plan? Or do you want to spend the last 20 minutes and give us an update on the Sunset Recreation Center?
Well, I don't really have a lot of objectives ready to share, I guess. So it doesn't seem like that would be the best use of our time. I'm happy to give some updates. I want to be mindful, I guess, that we're just kind of in a board workshop, but this is a public meeting. And I think some of the information, I guess, I'm just not, I think there's a lot of potential out there, but not a lot of concrete stuff. So maybe I can share some brief updates, and if the board wants specific information, then they can ask for that. Is that okay?
yeah,
Yeah.
and if we don't go till 5:30, then hey, we get some time back.
Shocking.
Okay, well, Erica, feel free to stop sharing your screen whenever, but I feel like I've tried to kind of keep the board in tune. I'm going to try to sort of organize my thoughts here. But there's been a lot of really good things that are happening at the SRC. And yes, we weren't necessarily planning on calling it that forever, but felt like it was a good kind of metaphorical turn the page from BMS to something more appropriate for what we hope the building will accomplish. The staff have been working. We have about 5 or 6 staff. Maintenance staff kind of come and go because they have other projects in other areas where they're focusing some of their time on, but we have about 5 or 6 staff typically working on kind of organizing things in the SRC, kind of inventorying some of the items that were left behind, and then kind of moving all of those things to one or a few congregated classrooms. What we were finding is there was, tables in every classroom. There was desks in every classroom. There was things kind of spread out throughout the building. So we really felt like it was more efficient to kind of move all that stuff to one area, count or inventory how much we have. And then what I hope to do is present that information back to the board and allow them to say, or I guess, let you all decide what we do with those things. Some of that stuff might have a place for other entities in our community. Some of it might not really be able to, we might not be able to repurpose it or find it another home, but we can do our best. And let's see here.
Skylar, can I
Yeah.
interject real quick?
Sure.
Do we have like a surplus policy, or, as a government agency, do we have to follow, like, okay, we've got, this has so much value, we have to
Yes,
sell it?
there are public entity policies or laws, statutes that are in place, and we do have to follow those. I don't think the district has ever adopted those policies at a local level, but those statewide mandates would guide the process unless the district wanted to have something kind of that was extra or supplemental.
So, and you may not know this, but out of all the things that you guys are accumulating, how much of it was things that we actually asked for, and how much was it just stuff that the school district left behind?
Great question. I would say we probably asked for maybe around 20 to 25% of the items that were left behind.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
And part of that might just be, some confusion on my part, on our part, and having never completed a large commercial property transaction. We sort of assumed that the items that we marked as inventory that we wanted to be retained in the sale, that those would be some of the only items or the only items that were left in the building, but they weren't. There was a lot of other items that were left as well, more than we were expecting. So
Can you go
Okay.
back? I mean, if that was explicit, that you had, key things that you were retaining, but then there was much more left. I mean, for example, I know at Gerhardt, a lot of people are having to go and remove things, and he's not, the owner isn't doing that himself.
I'm concerned about the cost that we're going to incur on getting rid of the items that the school district just decided to leave because it was easier for them.
And we know that they don't want those things for sure.
I know that they are done with that building.
So my comment is Providence had a pattern of like desks and bookcases and things like that they laid out as something that employees could look at purchasing for their personal use. And then they had some auctions once in a while when things were really popular, or they offered it to the public. If you want a desk from Broadway Middle School, and you have fond memories, come get it. So
The difference there, I think, would be, Sue, that they're not a government agency. They're a private entity.
Classic Community College used to have auctions as well and liquidate Potter wheels and all kinds of stuff from departments, computers.
Anyway,
I think there is a way to do some of those things, Sue, and maybe there is a way to pass on some of the goods that we have to the community. But we haven't explored that yet, and I think it's still a little early. I'm just letting you know, and I'd be happy to show you the classrooms that are now full of tables and chairs and desks and other items. Some of the items I think we'll be able to actually use for serving our purposes in the building, whether that's just in the short term or maybe even in the long term of the building. There were some items that were left behind that are really quite nice or will be useful for us. So in addition to kind of inventorying and organizing, there's a lot of cleaning going on. The building hasn't really been used, with the exception of, I think, janitors and maybe a few administrative staff since March. So just dust and little things like that, as is the case with a lot of properties near the Neowana. There's some rodents that like to hang around the outside of the building. So we're doing our best to keep those furry little friends out, and that's been pretty fun. We did turn the heat on in the gyms. The heat has been off for a little while. It wasn't necessarily needed. especially in the old gym. They were using that as a pretty significant storage area, and everything is working actually really well with the heat. The buildings, at least the part of the buildings that we have the heat on, it's warm. We haven't discovered any challenges, significant challenges as of yet with the heating system. So I think that's promising. Trying to think of some other SRC type updates before I dive into the main one. I guess one of the biggest things that is taking some of our time is fielding requests from folks that want to use the space available, mainly the gym space. And we have a really good relationship with PBL and some of their requests. We're fielding requests from some other local teams, volleyball and basketball primarily, but some other interested parties. And right now, the guidance does allow us to have some of those activities, but it's pretty tricky. And recent guidance came out on Friday that I believe I shared with the board. It kind of permits some of these activities, but only if you're able to follow, some pretty strict standards. And right now we don't have the capacity to follow all those standards. We're working to get things in place so that we can follow those standards, but it's things like having a separate entrance and exit, screening all participants for temperature and other pre-COVID screening questions. It's having the right signage out. It's ensuring that sports equipment is sanitized after every use. It's kind of having that 45-minute reservation schedule be implemented for a basketball practice, which is difficult. And so we're kind of working with Carrie and some of our other partners to make sure that they understand those details. I think there's a hope that the county will be moved to a lower risk category by the end of March, or by the end of February or March, and we'll be able potentially at that point to have PBL host, some of their weekend basketball tournaments. I know Carrie's ready to go. I think as soon as the guidance or the health department allows her to. So,
Skylar, I know you were on the school board meeting, but I also think that maybe we need to coordinate with the school a bit on the priority, because if they're opening their gyms as well, then, in volleyball, basically the sport that's in season is going to get priority. So maybe what you do is provide a space for some of those youth programs, especially that are literally not going to have any priority in any of the school gyms. So
Yeah.
I think that might be something to talk about. There was one other thing I was going to ask you. Now I'm forgetting. Oh man, it'll come to me, but I think the biggest gap that we're seeing for sports is that the elementary and the middle school kids have no sports, and the school district is not going to do anything for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's an area where we can definitely help. And I hope that, I hope we're able to kind of fill that gap as things, with the school resuming and things like that. I think there's an opportunity for us to work together. So.
Yeah. Oh, Skylar, what I was going to say is you asked me at the last board meeting, it was around some of the committee work. I think it was on the agenda, and I'm sorry that I was struggling with remembering what that was about. But I think for Tuesday, one thing I don't want to lose sight of is, for our 3 buckets that we had under the strategy, so sports, tourism, recreation, and then our childcare, I really think we should form subcommittees that incorporate, the board, staff, and community members, and really like have kind of a subcommittee for each of those categories. Because I think there's a lot of, I think that Sunset Parks and Rec can really become like the pillar for those activities, and bring the community together, and we've been talking about it all along. So anyway, I remembered this as soon as I got off the board meeting last week, and I just wanted to apologize for not remembering then, but I'm hoping Tuesday we can kind of look at that a bit.
Yeah, that is similar. When we ran our bond campaign, we formed kind of subcommittees in in the 3 areas of our programming at that time that we felt like would really be impacted by the new building. So that's a model I think that would work really well. And I like the kind of layering of board, staff, and community. That's awesome. So
Cool.
I guess the last topic about the SRC right now is we were approached late last week by Classic Community Action and Helping Hands, and they had an opportunity or wanted to discuss a potential opportunity to have the middle school or the SRC potentially serve as a warming center for the rest of the winter season. It would be a short-term thing for 6 to 8 weeks, and they sort of explained to me in a brief meeting that there was some funding available, that they felt like it could work. There's not really a place in our county besides the warming center in Astoria that can meet what is a very significant need, and especially more significant even considering the harsh weather that we get here, the cold nights, on occasion the rain and the wind. And I was really, I guess, intrigued by the opportunity. I think it meets our mission in that we're serving our community. To me, it seemed like a good use potentially of the space. I had a lot of questions and met with the staff from those 2 agencies a couple of times, presented the information as I knew it at the time to Catherine in a phone call. And she encouraged me to continue moving along with that, and have gotten more information. Those folks, those agencies are preparing a letter, basically a request to you all, the board, to see if you'll allow this to go on. We've sort of identified what needs to happen and where the program would take place. And as soon as I have that final letter, I'll share it with you, and it's something that I feel like the board will need to agree on moving forward. I think it's beneficial. I think it's worthwhile, but I think it's a board decision. So maybe we can do a few minutes of questions, because I'm sure there are some, and then we can save the rest of the conversation for when that letter is in your hands.
Skylar, I would think that would be something that we would need to hold a special meeting to discuss, and not wait for our official board meeting at the end of the month, because we would want to get that going quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right. The goal is to have the warming center, if everything goes well and you agree, to have it up and running sometime around Valentine's Day, which is in about 11 days. So it's a pretty quick timeline, but I think it's definitely doable. And the letter is sort of the next step, or the first, I guess, domino that would need to fall in the right spot.
Well, it is a short-term agreement. Oh, I'm sorry, Sue, just a moment.
How do you see?
You probably have authority as a rental or a lease on Park District property to go ahead, but it does seem like this is a novel and in a initial situation for the new recreation center, and there are questions to be asked about the authorization from public health and all the qualities that we need. But could you bring in a memorandum of understanding to the board for us to review if need be? Do you think that would work, Catherine?
I'm sorry, Mike, I got interrupted. Go. What was the question?
I was suggesting that possibly if Skylar needed to move ahead quickly to benefit these folks, to form a memorandum of understanding pursuant to board approval.
Yeah, I would agree.
But anyway,
I think the policy that you all adopted regarding my, I guess, authority or autonomy in these types of situations may have some application. I'll have to go back and look. I know that was specifically about IGAs, but I think it maybe it has some application for MOUs or other types of arrangements. And I'm not sure exactly where this will fall in the financial impact, if it's kind of above or below the cusp. I know you sort of established a standard by which things need to be approved or not approved. So I can go back and look at that, but yeah, I definitely, this isn't something that's going to move forward without the board being informed and agreeing, and maybe even helping, being solution-minded folks, because I just think it's a lot to ask of even the 3 agencies that are involved to pull it together this quickly.
I appreciate the work that you're putting in on this. I think it's a need that we have for the community. So thanks, Skylar. Any other updates? We've got 4 minutes left.
Well, I wanted to ask one question about I think the warming center is a great idea. And that is simply, when I went to various people at Thanksgiving, asking them to come and have food at, the Bob Chisholm Community Center, a lot of those people had a pet, and they would make sure that their pet was taken care of before themselves. And I know, being part of CERT, there, the emergency response team, there is a DART team that just got a grant and is looking for where to spend money regarding animal care down in Cannon Beach. And I don't know, but is there a way to think about helping to take care? I'm thinking of some of those people that were sitting outside with, and they were holding on to their dogs to stay warm. And I'm just wondering if we can somehow address the needs of those people by helping to take care of their pets as well. And I realize that's a sticky wicket.
That's a great point though, Sue.
And I guess that brings me to my question. I think in that MOU, or when you come back to the board, I'd be interested to know what the sort of business arrangement is between the entities, and whether, are we just a leaseholder and people are leasing space, or are we actually programmatically involved? I mean, while I am a huge dog lover and have rescued lots of dogs myself, but I don't know that I feel like that falls in the realm of what Park and Recs is set up to do. And so I'd just be curious about what the actual business relationship is. It a programmatic relationship, or is it simply that we're the leaseholder, the lessor, and they're the lessee?
Yeah, the way I understand the relationship right now, Celeste, is that we are the land. We would essentially be the landlords in this situation. We may provide some access, but as far as programming the warming shelter, providing the staff, providing the volunteers, that's not going to be on the district. We're going to provide the spaces for folks to have a night out of the cold or the elements. And then in the morning, after they leave the center or the shelter, our staff is probably going to be responsible for, providing some of that post-event sanitation or sanitizing, just say that. And those are things that we're, kind of accustomed to, because we've been providing that sanitizing effort. This is a different arrangement, but I think Helping Hands and Classic Community Action are going to be, kind of the programmers and setting the policies that will govern the shelter and how it works.
And then a follow-up question to that too is, I'd be interested to know about any implications for insurance, and whether or not that type of facility carries any kind of additional insurance costs. And then I'd also wonder about what happens when, because we have children and youth programs, and what there is for safe, because I assume that an emergency shelter like that is not going to do background checks and do appropriate other types of checks for safety. And so how do we avoid risk with the intermingling, whether it's with PBL youth or with our child care youth? How do we make sure that there is, that we're averting risk?
That's a great point. I can't speak to the insurance yet. But I will say we've had a lot of discussions about the intermingling or commingling of children. And I think, while I'm not sure the schedule with PBL or with other sports teams that might be practicing, what I think we're planning on doing is finding a way to limit access to the building to the two to three small classrooms part of the building that the shelter really needs to function, and the restrooms that they'll use, and then access to the other areas of the building will be restricted somehow. And then the timing of the shelter would be after our youth programming ends for the day. So after childcare has ended, kids are all picked up. And then those folks would need to be out in the morning by the set time before our childcare program starts again. So I think that kind of provides us with some buffer, but you're absolutely right. And it is an area or a topic that's come up in every meeting that I've had, because we don't really want necessarily a commingling of certain people who might be utilizing that shelter, I guess, with our patrons, our children that are enrolled in our programs.
Yeah. And I think that you also just started the conversation talking about the uptick in requests for sports kind of training. So, even though the childcare will leave, I think you're going to have in the evenings the practices starting. And
Well, and the other thing too, though, to think about is this is truly only going to be maybe till mid-March, potentially till the end of March, and then we move into warmer weather, and it's only going to be for a handful of days that the criteria, the temperature drops, so it's not an everyday thing, and it's not an entire year thing.
Yeah.
I also think I would also, as part of whatever the lease agreement is, or however that works, is to ensure that there is some assistance with management of loitering on the property that might take place. I just know that, it would be to be expected that if you're building in a place to be a warming center, that it would stand to reason that folks who had to leave or had to wait around could be just on the property. And whether or not, I know that they've had significant challenges, like over by the Mill Pond area, with people sort of hanging out. And so sort of what is the role of the people leasing to help us manage that? I think that would be a stretch for your staff to have to manage that.
I agree. Yeah, I think those are all great points.
What about checking in with the Astoria Warming Center and seeing how they've navigated all this?
Yeah, that's something we're definitely doing. I think we're using them as a template, and I think there's a lot to be learned from some of their experiences. They're obviously 5 or 6 years of established programming, so this program will look a little bit different, but we're gonna do our best if it ends up working out to kind of meet the same needs, just South County residents or South County homeless population.
So I would say just keep us posted, and we have reached our allotted time for this meeting. So unless anybody has anything further, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
I think the discussion was good. Thank you very much, Catherine. And thank you, Erica, particularly, and Celeste. And
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Erica, for putting
This is a very productive meeting.
I know they're doing vaccinations at the high school tonight, and they were looking for volunteers from 3:30 to 6:30 tonight. I told them I couldn't do it because I had to be in this board meeting. But,
Well, we appreciate you being here.
I thought
All right.
so.
Meeting adjourned, everybody. Have a great night.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.